Hey guys, Wayback Rewind here. Today I've got a brand new camera to show you. My Lumix G95 interchangeable lens mirrorless camera. Just bought it. I want to show you a quick overview of its features and then take it out in the field and show you how it shoots both pictures and video. Coming up next here on Wayback Rewind. Would have been nice if there had been some packaging in here to contain this box from just bouncing around in here. No DVD. You get the basic user manual. The Spanish basic user manual. You have to download the detailed manual. What should this contain? The camera body, interchangeable lens, lens hood, lens cap rear, body cap, hot shoe cover, battery grip connector cover, shoulder strap, battery pack, battery charger, AC adapter, USB cable. Very familiar Lumix looking setup. Lens hood. Lens. USB cable. Standard micro. Power brick. Battery charger. Battery. Shoulder strap. And the camera itself. And the unboxing is complete. Okay, welcome back. I mentioned in my video on the FZ300 that it was a bridge between the interchangeable lens camera and the point and shoot. I mentioned that I did not even own an interchangeable lens camera, so I took the opportunity to close that gap in my inventory and I picked up an interchangeable lens camera. So I didn't go crazy with a GH6 or a G92 or something like that. I mostly do travel photography, so I picked up a G95. A G95 is in the Lumix line, G series, but it's considered more on the amateur side. It's not really the professional camera like a GH6 or a G92. As far as I can tell, the way the G series works, the 2-character cameras are the more amateur lines like the G85. And then this is the successor, the G95. So it's a mild upgrade over the FZ. But let me explain the features and some of the differences. You can see it's actually somewhat smaller, believe it or not, even though it has higher capabilities. It's a thinner camera. The lens has a smaller diameter, which is kind of weird considering the sensor size, which I'll get into in a minute. There are more manual controls on here. You have a front dial and a rear dial versus just the rear dial, which is kind of nice. But other than that, the controls and layout are very similar. So let me get into why interchangeable lens camera is a better camera. I mean, it's obvious. I can change out the lenses and put whatever lens is appropriate to my shooting situation. So that being said, this lens doesn't have quite the reach. This is a 25 to 600. This is a 12 to 60. So this doesn't have quite the reach I think this is not quite apples to apples because I think this is using 35mm equivalent and this is using, you know, a crop factor of 2. So this is really a 24 to 120 compared to that, but it still doesn't have quite the reach. I mean, it's not a bad lens for the kit lens, but it doesn't have quite the reach of this camera. Now that being said, it has the 4/3 sensor, which has about 9 times the area of the 1/2.3. And also, this has a higher quality sensor. It's larger, has more pixels, so I should be able to generate a better raw image than with the FZ300. There are some other upgrades. Obviously, you have the focusing ring here. This has no focusing rings. You have the manual zoom ring. This has the zoom control, no manual zoom. On the left side here, you have the same micro HDMI, but instead of proprietary USB, you have the standard micro USB. This camera will charge from the micro USB, and you can also power the camera through the micro USB. And also there's a headphone jack along with the remote. So in this camera, you have the headphone jack and you have the USB standard size, which is nice. Under here, this camera uses the exact same battery as the FZ300, which is nice. So I have a lot of aftermarket batteries, so I now have a total of 4 batteries that will fit this camera, which is a nice thing. And they moved this over enough that with most tripod mounts you can probably still get to the battery without having to remove the tripod mount. And the SD card slot is no longer there. It has its own door on this side. So even while it's mounted on the tripod, you can get to the SD card a lot easier. No problem. As far as the other controls, the AFS, AFF, AFC, MF, exactly the same. It's rotated a few degrees, but it's the same. Your playback controls, display, function controls are a little bit moved around. The FC has 2 function controls up here. You only have 1, but you only need 1 because you have a dedicated white balance, ISO, and gain. You still have the dedicated record buttons here, and your rotary switch has the PA, S, and M modes like before. Dedicated movie mode. You have 2 custom programs here, where the FC only has 1. You have 2 custom programs along with creative mode and the IA fully auto. So those controls all look very much the same. Now I'm going to power it up for the first time ever. Of course, it wants me to set the language. I'm going to take English, set the clock. It starts from 2019. This camera was born in 2019. It's 4 years old now, but it's still sold brand new. That's going to sound very familiar. That's a story that exists across the camera world today. Cameras come out and they continue making them for years later with nothing better really new on the horizon. Okay, the clock is set. I need to set the home area. Toronto, New York. Nope. Houston. Picture size. Okay, the 4/3 sensor basically has an aspect ratio of 4:3. It's one of the reasons why this is called a 4/3, because it has a 4:3 sensor. To get the maximum pixel qualities, you're going to want to stay in that 4:3. So I can get up to a 20 megapixel picture if I stay in the 4:3. So I'm going to stay in the 4:3. Quality, I want the highest quality without being in RAW. Record format, MP4. Record quality, I'm going to go up to the highest, 30p. This camera has a very similar video quality to the FC. Menus look very similar. I think I'd rather stay in continuous autofocus since I mostly do video. These are my first impressions since I've turned this camera on for the first time. I don't really know what half this stuff is, but I just wanted you to see and witness what turning the camera on for the first time looks like. So we're going to turn that off, open this up, and see what the camera sees for the first time ever. Okay, first thing, I'm used to that zoom lever being right here. They got rid of that zoom lever right here. I've got that front dial, which is not a zoom lever. So there's got to be a power zoom on here somewhere. Maybe not. Maybe not. Is it all manual zoom? Maybe it's all manual zoom. I'm going to have to read the manual. So as I'm standing here holding this, it just now dawned on me that there's no zoom levers on here, and there's no zoom levers on here. This is a totally manual lens. That tells you how much research I did on the mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras. I did not realize, first of all, that the kit lens is a fully manual lens. And I also did not realize how scarce power zoom lenses are in the Micro Four Thirds line altogether. Now, it doesn't surprise me that the kit lens is manual, but what did surprise me is when I started looking online to buy a power zoom lens to replace this, and found out they are very scarce. And I guess the reason for that is that these cameras tend to be used by professionals. The professionals don't really use power zoom. A professional will, set up their shot, take their shot, whether it's video or stills, and then they'll go set up their next shot and take the next shot, whether it's video or still. So a professional isn't sitting there going wide and tight like an amateur would do. But nevertheless, I haven't bought a camera in 20 years that didn't have a power zoom. It didn't even occur to me to look for the power zoom lever. It didn't even occur to me that there would not be a power zoom on this lens. So let me continue the tour. I did put the tripod mount on here to prove that in general you can put a tripod mount on here and you still have access to the battery. It is definitely an improvement over the FC. The tripod mount is just way too close to the battery. For some reason they put it like more in the center of the camera from left to right. On this camera they moved it over to in this direction some. It's almost too far over because when I set it on the tripod mount it's a little wobbly. It's not really centered as far as mask is concerned, but it does allow you to access this door. Also notice this door has a punch out here. I can use the DC adapter on here. If you saw my video on the FC 300, I have a DC adapter. Let me just show you. I can put the DC adapter in there. And then you say, well, how is this going to get out through there? The DC adapter has a way to close it up. I lost my weather sealing, but at least I can get the wire out of this hole. So I have two ways to power this camera. I can power it through the USB. I can actually charge the battery with the USB, or I can power it all day with the DC adapter. Now the DC adapter does have an advantage. So I've read in the manual, the USB is 5 volts of course. It said that under some loads, like if you're recording video, the camera can draw more power than what the USB can provide, so it will eventually drain the battery. The DC adapter runs at a higher voltage. I believe this runs at 7.4 volts, so the DC adapter can run the camera indefinitely versus the USB charger. This camera does have unlimited 4K. The FZ has an artificial built-in limit of 2959. This camera has unlimited except for what your memory and your battery can do and potential overheating. I don't know if this camera has any fans in it. It may. I'm not exactly sure. The one last thing I want to show you on here is on top you have a dedicated mode dial. On the FZ it's just blank. The FZ, there's no mode dial. You access the modes through the screen. Drive mode comes up on the screen versus On the G95, there's a dedicated mode dial here. If you switch back and forth between single, multiple, and 4K burst a lot, this is a useful thing, obviously. I think I already mentioned that the function buttons are spread out roughly the same way. We've got playback, function 2, and display, function 3. The main difference here is instead of having a second function button up here, I had two function buttons up here on the FZ. Instead, I have white balance, ISO, and a dedicated gain button. Plus, I have the front dial and the rear dial. And this is also a dial. So I have a lot of controls here, minus the zoom, which is missing, which is a little bummer. I'm old school. I guess power zoom is old school, but you know me, I am old school. So I would rather have a power zoom than not have it. So that being said, I have a power zoom lens on order. Now I want to share some sample footage with you, both with and without the power zoom lens. And then at the end, I'll come back and wrap it up for you here on Wayback Rewind. And so there you have it. My Lumix G95, the power zoom lens, my first interchangeable lens, mirrorless camera. I'm still somewhat shocked of the scarcity of power zoom lenses. This lens is basically only usable outdoors. I would need the 14 to 42 power zoom lens to use indoors, or just put my original 12 to 60 back on with the manual zoom. But other than that, this is the G95, primarily a still camera, but it does shoot video. But to be honest, I'm a little disappointed. I know that interchangeable lens cameras with large sensors, you give up a lot of reach on the zoom, but I got spoiled with the 25 to 600 on the FZ. This 14 to 175 is just a little painful to give up all of the reach that I had on my advanced point and shoot cameras. But if you want to play with the big boys, you got to make some sacrifices. This isn't even a full frame camera. Imagine how expensive the power zoom lenses are. I don't even want to find out. But for now, this is probably not the first camera I would grab if I wanted to do a video. Maybe not even the second. But it does shoot 4K video. And it does have a large sensor. So there you have it. The G95 from Lumix, aka Panasonic. If you found this helpful, please like or subscribe to my channel. And thanks for watching.